Can you all hear me? Voice state, please join me in prayer. God, thank you for all that you've done for us this week. Thank you for guiding us to this point. Thank you for all of the special events you've put in our hearts. And please continue guiding us as we go throughout this government program. In your name, amen.
Take your seats. Good afternoon, boys staters. We've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to teach you a little chant. It's really easy. I think you guys can do this. We're all going to do it together. We've been here in some cities doing some good chants. Some of you are good. Some of you, you got a little work to do. But we're going to do this all together. It's something we do at Boys Nation. It's a lot of fun, but it's real simple. So you've seen how the band director, when he goes like this and he stops the band, right? So y'all got to watch when we do this, and it's real simple. You're going to start off real quietly and say, USA, 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 and you're going to get louder and louder and louder, and then I'm going to cut you off, and you got to stop. And if somebody messes up, we got to start over, okay? And then when we do that, you go, USA, and then you're going to say, I'm going to go like this, and you're going to go, USA, one more time, USA, and that's the end. It's real simple, okay? Everybody stand up. We'll make this a practice round, okay? Counseling staff, who knows it, help me out, okay, on this first one. So here we go. USA, 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 USA. Oh. Somebody did it. Somebody did it. You got to watch. What city was that? Ching? Must have been Ching City. All right, let's try again. Here we go. Ready? USA, 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 USA. One more time. USA. Give yourselves a hand. That was almost perfect. We're going to do it one more time. One more time. Almost perfect. Here we go. USA, 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 USA. One more time. USA. Good job. Good job, everybody. You could take your seats. Okay, we got to fill a little time here, so I'm going to take an executive privilege. Who's got a good, clean, short joke? Come on up. Come on up. Now listen, I was just told by the director that depending on how many laughs you get, it might count towards City of Excellence. I don't know.
What's the cop's favorite door? The copper door.
Boo, boo, boo. Parker? Who's got another joke? We got to do better than that. Come on, come on. Hey, This goes for staff also, except for David Brooks. Any other jokes are okay.
All right, what do you call a dog with no legs? Doesn't matter what you call it, it's not running.
Man, we need a good joke. This is terrible. Come on. Parker seems scared. I don't know. Garrison, you got one too? Okay. City of Excellence is on the line. I don't know.
Two mental inmates decide they want to escape. They both reach the roof, and one makes it over perfectly. The other's scared. The guy says, "Hey, I got this flashlight. I'll shine it across, and you can walk across the light." The guy says, "What do you think I am? Crazy? You'll turn it off."
Yeah, booze. You're getting booze.
These two cowboys are stranded in the desert. Two cowboys stranded in the desert, and they're getting real hungry. They can't find any food. One of them sees a bacon tree. He takes off running. He says, "We're saved. There's food." He gets shot down. The other one says, "Should have known. It wasn't a bacon tree. It was a ham bush."
Hardy, har, har. You don't have to come up here if you don't want. Okay, he's a trooper. While he's coming up, I got one for you. College kid. Listen up. College kid, not much older than you guys, moves to OU in Norman, moves into a new apartment complex. He's all excited. He's out of high school. He's got his own place for the first time. I guess he'd be a sophomore, so let's make it his sophomore year. Neighbor comes over. Guy lives next door. Comes over and goes, "Hey, neighbor, I just wanted to meet you." "Oh, yeah, great." He goes, "I'm having a little party tonight." "Oh, yeah, cool." He goes, "You're invited. What's going to be going on?" "There's going to be some music, some dancing, some good food, maybe some kissing, some making out." And he goes, "Whoa, who all's going to be there?" "Just you and me."
Got City.
That may be the best one yet. All right, one more. Oh, Cody's got one. Parker, come on up, Cody.
All right. What is a werewolf's favorite drink? What is a werewolf's favorite drink? Moonshine.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Oh, yeah, this is mine. Yeah, let's go, Clay. Okay, so guess what, guys? Oh, yeah, you're great. My name's Parker Robinson. I'm going to LSU University. Geox Tigers.
Is that the joke? That's the joke? Get out of here. Boomer Sooner.
Something.
You ready?
Yeah, thanks for keeping them.
Can we do one more? We got time?
I got time to kill.
Okay, we're done for now. We'll do more later. Thanks, guys. I'm here all week. Try the veal. It's good.
All right, gentlemen, how are we doing today? I love the energy. So before we get started on our guest speaker today, and I'll give you his bio before he logs on, we're honored to have him here with us today, but I think you guys are probably curious about one thing, right? Maybe? No? No? Okay. Here, Cody, take it back. You can have it. No, you want to know? City of Excellence? Anybody want to know? I can't hear you guys. Anybody want to know City of Excellence? There we go. All right, so when our guest speaker logs on, for the most part, the technical setup we have here, it's going to be a moderated discussion. There are going to be times that I turn to you guys as an audience for some audience input. I want that level of energy. Is that good, guys? Yes, sir. All right. So I'm going to trust y'all, and I'm going to give you the answers up front of where you guys stand for City of Excellence. Who thinks they're on top? There we go. All right. In third place, Bloxham City. Currently in second, Roan City. And in first, Gott City. I guess they're not so much of a joke, huh? Cody, can you pull the picture up? So today, when I was in your seats 20 years ago, I wouldn't have known who the person speaking to you guys today was. But you're going to hear from Dr. Richard Haass. He's a veteran diplomat and a prominent voice on American foreign policy. He's currently in his 20th year of president of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is an independent, nonpartisan organization, think tank, publisher, and educational institution, which is dedicated to being a resource to help people better understand the world and the foreign policy choices facing the United States and other countries. In 2013, he served as chair of multi-party negotiations in Northern Ireland that provided foundation for an agreement that promoted peace and conflict resolution, for which he was awarded the 2013 Tipperary International Peace Award. From January 2001 to January 2003, Dr. Haass was Director of Policy Planning for the Department of State, where he directed the policy planning staff and was principal advisor to Secretary of State Colin Powell. He was confirmed by the U.S. Senate to hold the rank of ambassador. Dr. Haass also served as U.S. Coordinator for Policy toward the future of Afghanistan and the U.S. Envoy to the Northern Ireland peace process. Dr. Haass also has extensive government experience. From 1989 to 1993, he was a special assistant to President George H.W. Bush and senior director for Near East and South Asian affairs on the staff of the National Security Council. In 1991, Dr. Haass was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal for his contributions to the development and articulation of U.S. policy during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Previously, he served in the Departments of State from 1981 to 1985 and the Defense Department from 1979 to 1980, and also served as a legislative aide in the U.S. Senate. Dr. Haass is a Rhodes Scholar and holds a bachelor's degree from Oberlin College and a master's and doctorate of philosophy degrees from Oxford University. He's also received numerous honorary degrees and was a member of the faculty of the Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government and Hamilton College. Dr. Haass is the author or editor of 14 books on American foreign policy, 1 book on management, and 1 on American democracy. His latest book, which you'll hear about today, The Bill of Obligations, The 10 Habits of Good Citizens, was published this year in January and became a New York Times bestseller. He's also the author of a weekly newsletter, and he's seen on TV on shows such as Morning Joe. Dr. Haass was born in Brooklyn and currently lives in New York City and exchanges time in Washington, D.C. You can see Dr. Haass here on the picture in front of you. He's over here on the far right. This picture was taken just a few days ago. Does anybody recognize the gentlemen and ladies that are with him in this photo? Yeah, who are they? I saw your hand. Who are the people in this photo with him? Does anybody know right here? They are. A particular type of generals. They are the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Dr. Haass, this is why he couldn't travel to be with you guys today, but just mere days ago, he was sitting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, having conversations with them. And today, he's going to spend time with you all, talking about his views on citizenship. And so we're really honored to have him with us today. He should be logging on momentarily, but I show you guys this photo because he's an incredibly thoughtful man, and he's very generous with his time to speak to you guys about citizenship. So hopefully you all will take a whole lot out of this discussion. I picked up a copy of his book back in January when it was first released, and I have a lot of commuting time on the DC Metro where I work at the Pentagon, so I'm reading to and from work. And his book showed up on my doorstep, and I decided to pick it up, read it, and I was like, this is Boise State in a book. And so when the day I finished the book that evening, I got online and I found his email address, and I wrote Dr. Haass a note, and I said, hey, Dr. Haass, I just finished your book, your new book, the Bill of Obligations, and I loved what it had to say about the habits of citizenship. And I'm a volunteer with the Oklahoma Boise State program. It's exactly what we try to teach young men that are about to enter civic engagement. They're going to be voting age, et cetera. And I would love if you'd be able to come speak to Boise State about what you wrote. And I told him, I said, we can't afford your honorarium, and we can't buy first-class plane tickets, and we can't, we can't pay for it because, we want to bring as many delegates here as possible. But what we can do is we can give you like a warm meal, a bed to sleep in, and about 300 minds to influence. And the very next day, he wrote me back. He said, hey, I already have some commitments on my calendar for that time period, but I'd love to speak to the kids, so let's make it happen. And so that's what's going to happen here today, here in a few minutes, when he logs on. The very next day, he wrote me back, And so I was chatting with Ching City the other night. I had the pleasure to sit down with them before TAPS. And the lesson I want you guys to take away from that is, like, you never know what can happen when you ask, right? When you ask in the right way, let's put it that way. You never know what can happen when you ask in the right way. And so I think we're very privileged to have him here. I love the lessons that are in the book. I'm going to moderate a discussion with Dr. Haass so that hopefully you can take away some lessons from that book, and hopefully it'll encourage you to go back home and get a copy yourself and read it and study it and share it with your friends and family members, because I think we can all agree from what we see out there versus what we practice here at Boise State, we need some better habits of citizenship. Am I right? Yes, sir. All right. So bear with me for a couple of moments. It looks like we got about 3 minutes to go, but when he's online, let's have energy when he joins us. Give him the good Boise State welcome, and I'll ask for some audience participation collectively, just because the text situation doesn't allow us to do it individually. And then when that happens, please be engaged, but beyond that, be respectful. And big thing, buddy system, right? I'm big about this. Those of y'all I taught in special school, it's late in the week, we're all tired, we're all missing more sleep than we're used to, so help each other out, okay? And if you're nodding off, stand up, get to the back, and stay standing, because there's some important lessons, and we want to be respectful of Dr. Haass's time. Sound good, everybody? Okay, all right. Thanks for your attention. I'll be back out in a moment. Everything good? Yeah, he'll probably join us right at 12:30. So I'm going to go sit in my chair. Okay. Dr. Haass, welcome to Oklahoma American Legion Boise State. Can you hear us?
I hear you perfectly. How are you
All
doing
right.
today?
Good. Let's give him a warm Boise State welcome, everybody. Come on.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So Dr. Haass, I hope you don't mind. I did the introduction as we were, before you logged on, so gave him your bio and mentioned that just a few days ago, you were sitting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Council on Foreign Relations. And so we're very honored to have you here at Boise State with us. Could you share a couple of takeaways from that meeting with them to get us kicked off, and then we'll jump into your book?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me today, and I want to congratulate the young men who are doing this. I think it's great that they've made this commitment of time and effort. I've mentioned it, by the way, Boise State, to a few friends of mine, and everything I hear is great about it. So from people who have gone through it and so forth. So very excited to be doing this with you. Yeah, I met with as you suggest, the Joint Chiefs of Staff the other night in Washington in a public setting at the Council on Foreign Relations. The first thing I always take away is just how impressive they are. You don't get to be a 4-star general or admiral easily. And what's so interesting about the military as an institution, in this country, it really stands out as something of a meritocracy, where you are given every opportunity either to succeed or fail. You're given tremendous personal responsibility, and in many cases, the greatest responsibility anyone can imagine, responsibility for the lives of your colleagues and those who serve with you. And I always come away just impressed and thankful, one, how talented they are, and but also how solid they are. And these are the kinds of individuals, these men and women, who you say, okay, I understand why they are where they are, and I feel good that they are where they are, that they are the sort of people who ought to be entrusted with responsibilities, and then also how thoughtful they are. When we talked about not just narrow military subjects, but all sorts of diplomatic subjects, political subjects, the sort of thing I do for a living, you realize, again, they bring an awful lot of experience and wisdom after having done this for, 30, 40 years in many cases. So, again, I think I really do think the military stands out as one of the fine institutions in this in this society.
I appreciate you saying that, because we have a lot of veterans here. As you know, the American Legion is a veterans organization, and so thank you for that. And we have a lot of kids in the audience, I think, that are thinking about serving in the United States military. So, it's a good way of life. It's a good way to serve your country, and you can hear it from a man who's worked with those people for quite some time and worked with the best of them.
Let me just say, I think it's great that so many people are thinking of public service. The military is obviously one way to do it. There's lots of other ways as well.
Absolutely.
And federal government, state government, local government. There's just so many ways to serve. And I would just hope that every person who's in this program would, in the course of his life, find a time to do it, either as a career, where you do it for decades, or even as a stint. If you become a lawyer or an engineer or a teacher, what have you, that you find in the course of your career some time to maybe go work in a quote unquote public service. I think it's a great way to give back. It's a great way to learn. Again, it gets at what I'm writing about in the book I've just done. We need citizen involvement, and we want, to use the phrase of my generation, we want the best and the brightest to go into government. And where people are frustrated with government, my view is, well, don't sit back and just criticize it. Go in and make it better.
Right.
At the end of the day, we are the government. It is we're a government of the people. So I really want the best and brightest to go in, and I don't want young people to be deterred simply because governments make mistakes at times. Of course they do. The real question in a democracy is, can we learn from those mistakes? And can we produce better public policy for our citizens? And one of the best ways I know to produce better public policy is by having the most talented people in our society make it either a career or go in for a couple of years.
We've got a lot of those kids right here at Boise State, so I'm glad to hear that message. For you personally, sir, what inspired you to pursue government service?
The honest truth is I didn't think I would. I was interested in international subjects when I came of age. When I went to college, the big issue was the Vietnam War, and it got me interested in public policy. I was not old enough to have lived through the big parts of the civil rights movement that came before I came of age politically, had any awareness. But the Vietnam debate was big when I was in college. And then when I was in graduate school over in England, all sorts of things were going on both within the United Kingdom. Tremendous divisions in their politics. I was reading, among other things, the works of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, his condemnations, his criticisms of the Soviet system. It just seemed in many ways that the most interesting topics, the most interesting issues when you got up in the morning were issues dealing with politics, whether it was foreign policy or domestic. And I thought I wanted to be a professor. And so I did all my work and so forth. And then afterwards did essentially a postdoc and went to a think tank in the UK in London. And at some meeting I gave a paper, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you seem like a pretty smart young guy. Why don't you come work at the Pentagon with us?" And by then I had decided that I wanted at least an experience outside of the classroom. I had worked as a congressional aide for a year before, and it whetted my taste. And I went into the Pentagon, and one thing happened after another, after another, after another. So for me, it wasn't that I planned a career in it. And indeed, I've gone in and out of government. I've been lucky enough to work at the Pentagon, at the White House, at the State Department a couple of times. It just seemed to me, again, the most interesting thing you could possibly do. What's so great about public service is that on one hand, it's an intellectual thing. You're thinking about policy and all that, but it's also operational. You're not just thinking about it or writing about it, you're doing it. And it's that combination of the intellectual and the operational. It's really a full body workout in many ways for any for any person. And when you're working with others, it can often be as satisfying as anything you do, particularly in those moments in government where you're working together rather than against one another. So when it's good, it can be, really, really good, which is all a long-winded way of saying I didn't set out to make it a big part of my life. It just became a big part of my life because it proved to be, in many ways, more interesting and more satisfying, and I thought more purposeful than anything else I had ever encountered.
All right. So you tried it and then fell in love with it, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm doing this conversation with you all now. I'm doing another one in a few hours for young people. And one of my pieces of advice, particularly when you're young, say in your 20s, a little bit older than these young men here, is don't get stuck on trying to come up with the right answer at the beginning of your path, but expose yourself to different things, try different things, choose situations where you learn the most, where you get tested. And sometimes you'll find this is great, you get lucky, you stumble on the perfect fit for you. In many cases, you won't. You'll say, okay, that's not for me. And that's fine too. But don't put all the pressure on yourself to figure it out from the get-go. Almost think of your 20s, even your early 30s, as a time to experiment, to experience. And so long as you're learning in each situation, so long as you're being exposed to new things, you'll learn about new things, new crafts. You'll also learn about yourself. And that to me is the way to think about the early stages of your career. It's almost like what a doctor does. Before he chooses his specialty, he gets a rotating residency, and he or she gets exposed to different specialties. And that's not a bad way to think about the early years or decade of your life and career, is to put yourself in a whole range of situations. You learn from each, and you find out what might be the best fit for you.
Yes, sir. So you're the president of the Council on Foreign Relations currently. What inspired you to write a book about domestic issues, the Bill of Obligations, the 10 Habits of Good Citizens?
It's a fair question, and 10 years ago, it did not occur to me. And I almost stumbled across it. Again, a lot of what happens in life, I think, is simply what happens, not because you plan it, but you stumble across it, you experience it. In this case, I'd be giving talks on foreign policy all the time, and people would always ask me the question, what are you most worried about? What keeps you up at night? And they'd say, is it China or Russia or terrorism or climate change or what have you? And I would say, yeah, all those things worry me. But what worries me the most is us, whether this democracy of ours is going to function well enough that we can provide the resources that we need for our citizens, that it can deliver enough so citizens see the value of this democracy and support it, that we're going to be united enough so we can play a large role in the world or set an example that others might want to emulate. So increasingly, I came to see what is going on here at home as a national security issue. That national security is not simply foreign policy or not just what the Joint Chiefs of Staff have to worry about, as important as all that is, but national security also, the other side of that coin, if you will, is about how well our society functions, how well we meet our domestic challenges, because if we fail to meet our domestic challenges, we're not going to be in any position to meet any international challenges. And without us, I think the situation in the world deteriorates badly. Good things just don't happen because they ought to happen. Good things happen because good individuals or good countries help bring them about. So I come to the conclusion that what we really need to work on is are things here at home. And so one thing led to another, and then the events of January 6th in some ways galvanized it. But I came to think that it was no longer unthinkable that we could have domestic politically inspired violence here. I had spent 3 years as the United States envoy to Northern Ireland. I had seen what divisions in a society, in a modern society, could do in the way of provoking violence between segments of the society and the community. And I basically came away saying, this could happen here. And so, and just to be clear, I'm not pessimistic. I don't believe anything is inevitable, but also I'm not sanguine. Again, I don't think bad things don't happen or good things automatically do happen. So I decided to write this book to start a national conversation. Look, I don't claim to have all the answers on this or anything else. I learned a lot in writing this book because in many ways I came to it not as an expert on a lot of these subjects. I haven't been working on a lot of these questions for decades like I have on foreign policy questions. But I thought it was essential to basically make the argument that American democracy is in trouble. It will have all sorts of implications, not just for our quality of life here at home, but for what we're able to do in the world. And I wanted to get people talking about it, and to ultimately, I'm hoping that then they will do something about it. But that's how I got here.
Yeah, I think I've heard you say in some of your interviews that a lot of the focus right now seems to be on political reform, but you don't believe we're at the point right now culturally where we're ready for that. And so can you talk to us about this difference about political reform and rights and what you're focusing on in your book, which are obligations as citizens?
Yeah, so let me say two things. One is there's a million ideas out there about political reform. I've read all sorts of reports, this Blue Ribbon Commission and this study group and all that saying, here's what we have to do about this or that domestic political problem. And in many cases, they're right in diagnosing the problem. And in many cases, they make to me attractive suggestions about what we ought to do about it to fix the problem. But it's not going to happen. Our political system is the way it is for a reason. And it's evolved in certain ways. And individuals and groups, in many cases, see a benefit in things being the way they are and tend to resist changes that they think would not favor or advantage their interests. So it turns out that political reform in the United States, even when it's warranted, it's extraordinarily difficult to come by. If it were easy, it would have happened by now. So the reason I decided to write this book, in part, was to say we have to change the way we act towards one another. We have to change the way we act or think about this government if we're going to create a climate, if we're going to create a context in which desirable political reform has a chance of happening. But if we try to go straight without passing go, straight to political reform, we're going to be frustrated. So I wanted to take a step back and say, look, this is not a book about policy. I'm not recommending this or that stance on any issue. I'm not saying we should or should not aid Ukraine or this or that on abortion or this or that on guns. That's not the purpose of this. What I'm talking about is the way we approach all these and other issues that tend to divide us. And my thought was that specifically led to what I'm writing about here is that a democracy cannot rest on a foundation of rights alone. And don't get me wrong, rights are central to a democracy. If I were to ask you or anybody else involved in this meeting, what words come to mind when you hear the word democracy, people would say things like freedom and rights, and that's the appropriate response. And this society, even though we've made some real progress over the centuries, we're still not perfect. It was Abraham Lincoln who had famously talked about the unfinished work of America. But my argument is that even if we were somehow able to finish this work, and the Declaration of Independence, there was no gap between the Declaration of Independence and our realities, that our rights were fully respected. Even then, our democracy could still be in trouble. And the reason is that inevitably rights collide. Take it the abortion debate, a woman's right to choose versus the rights of the unborn. Or the gun debate, someone's rights to acquire, possess arms pursuant to the Second Amendment, someone else's rights to public safety. A lot of the debates we had during the pandemic about vaccination and masking. And it turns out that rights, again, inevitably come into friction, and we need a way for navigating that, for coming to terms, because what we don't want to have is a situation either where opposing views on rights lead to gridlock, so we can't get anything done, or worse yet, differing views on rights spill over into violence. People feel so passionately about supporting this right or opposing that one that it leads to bloodshed. So what I'm trying to do is essentially say, increasingly we have to think of citizenship not simply in terms of rights, what we're owed, what we're promised, but also in terms of obligations, what we've got to do again for one another, what we've got to do for this country of ours. So what I've written is, and I've thought about it hard, and I've written about what I believe are the fundamental obligations of a citizen in a democracy. And some of these are obligations, again, about how we deal with, treat one another. And some of these are obligations about our relationship with government and our relationship with this country. And my view is if we embrace these obligations, I believe it'll leave all of us better off. But that's the argument. And what I want to do, again, is trigger a national conversation. And I want people to look inward, to think about it, to look at their own behaviors. I want people to talk about it with their friends, their colleagues, even people who are not friends, people they disagree with. I want that now. I want Americans to learn how to, once again, deal with one another, even though they would inevitably disagree with one another.
So could you summarize the obligations that you identified that you think should be habits of good citizens? So you've identified 10 of them.
Yeah, now you're going to put me on the spot, so I'll see if I can...
I've got the book if you want me to, yeah.
Well, you've got it in front of you. I think
absolutely, sir. So I'll do an overview of them, and then we'll go through and discuss a few of them. So Dr. Haass wrote 10 obligations he thinks should be habits of good citizens. The first one is be informed. The second is to get involved. The third is to stay open to compromise. The fourth is to remain civil. The fifth is to reject violence. The sixth is to value norms. The seventh is to promote the common good. The eighth is to respect government service. The ninth is support the teaching of civics. And the 10th is to put country first. So with that, I want to get some audience feedback. Unfortunately, we don't have a microphone that we can share. But gentlemen, your experience here at Boise State, I mean, do you think that's pretty consistent with what Dr. Haass wrote in this book, what we're trying to teach and educate and have you guys experience through government and action? Yes, So, Dr. Haass, when you talk about getting involved, right, you say this is the baseline obligation. Why is that?
Well, democracy is a form of government which puts the lion's share of the responsibility and the authority and the power in the hands of the people. That's one of the fundamental defining attributes of a democracy. It's not a spectator sport. So we have to, among other things, vote. We have to, not have to, but in many cases I would say we ought to serve and so forth. So, the first obligation is to be informed. But then, too, we want people to get involved. That's the only way, again, what we were talking about a few minutes ago. We want the best and brightest to get involved in government. We want citizens to hold their elected representatives, or those the elected representatives appoint. We want them to hold them to account. We want them to make sure that they're doing the people's work and they're doing it honestly and they're doing it well. And if they're not, then somebody else should be given the chance. But it's the only way we can make the society better. The only way we can improve policy that emerges from government is by having citizens being involved. But first, they've got to be informed. I mean, it was Ronald Reagan who spoke about not just patriotism, but informed patriotism. And it was, Jefferson argued that being informed is the most basic obligation of a citizen. But then we want them to get involved. The fact that in November we had the midterm elections, more than half of the eligible voters in the United States didn't vote. It's the kind of thing that makes me shake my head. We fought for independence so we could determine our own destiny. Yep. We have supported people all over the world so they could determine their own destinies. The idea that people would not take the opportunity to vote and grab it and exercise it is, to me, it's baffling in some ways. I mean, I've read about it and I understand why they don't. But participation in a democracy is, again, the best way I know that citizens can hold government and authority accountable.
Yeah, I think
you wrote also, it. It can be a satisfying choice of things to do as well. And there's a lot of ways to make a difference, to help your neighbors, your family, your community. It's not the only way. You can improve the lives of Americans in business and lots of other pursuits, don't get me wrong. But government touches so many basic aspects of our lives, if you think about it, that this is one of the central ways to improve the quality of life in this country.
Yeah, I think you wrote in the book that we don't get what the majority wants, we get what the majority who participates wants. And so it's important to get involved. We're coming up on elections again, and I think the next two obligations in terms of staying open to compromise and remaining civil, we've become a very divided, deeply divided country, and I think that's what drove you to write the book, where even families during election years can't talk about politics. And you have advice about public debate needs to make us feel uncomfortable. What advice do you have for us to navigate those conversations, not just nationally, but even at the dinner table with our families where there are political disagreements?
Well, there's an added incentive at the dinner table because you might be having dinner with the same people tomorrow night. Yeah. Can't have a food fight every night. Yeah. Look, one of the reasons to be civil is a slightly more serious version of what I just said. You and I could disagree today on a certain issue. But tomorrow we may find ourselves in a position to work together on something. But if we have so broken the relationship between us, if our ability to communicate or trust, coexist has been destroyed because of our disagreement today, then even we'll never experience the possibility of working together tomorrow. So there's that kind of self-interest in civility. Also, just as a practical matter, I haven't seen anyone become more persuasive because they interrupt somebody else or shout them down or curse at them or anything else. That doesn't persuade anybody. That's not going to bring them around to a different position. They're just going to dig in their heels and they're going to stop listening to you. So it turns out civility is a pretty practical thing to do. It's also, think about it, it's the way you want to be treated. We all want to be listened to. We all want to be respected. That doesn't mean people have to agree with us. No one should ever equate someone respecting us and someone agreeing with us. The two could not be more different. But we want to be heard and we want to be listened to. And if somebody disagrees, we want to hear why. And then we want to have the opportunity to maybe bring them around. And that just seems to me, that's the basic, that's close to the basics of how we interact with our neighbors and anyone we're in school with or in the workplace with. Compromise is important because we're inevitably going to disagree to one degree or another on virtually everything. And the question then is, how do we get things done? We've just had an important demonstration of a willingness to compromise in Washington. You had the vote in the House of Representatives on lifting the debt ceiling. You know, we could have a long conversation about how we got to this point, who's to blame more than the other, and so forth. But what was so interesting about the vote is you got a majority of Republicans and a majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives to support an outcome that probably few, if any, of them loved. Right. There's always details. There's things you didn't get that you wish you'd gotten, and there's things that you had to agree with that were difficult to stomach. But still, people voted for it. A majority on both sides of the aisle voted for it. I took that as a really healthy sign, that they came together in order to avoid an outcome that would have been bad and far worse for everyone. And that, when I say be open to compromise, that's what I think you've got to be. It doesn't mean you always compromise. There might be occasions where you say, I've really looked at it, and in this case, I think we would be worse off with a compromise. Okay, those occasions are rare, but they will happen. But my view is weigh the compromise versus the alternatives. And don't simply turn something down because, again, it isn't everything you want. You've always got to think about, well, what are the consequences? What is the alternative? Am I really better off? Because in most cases, you won't be better off. And better to get, to use the old cliche, half a loaf than none. So I actually think compromise is necessary if a political system is going to work. The political system you don't need compromise in, by the way, is not a democracy. It's authoritarian systems. And you're basically told somebody in a position of power decides and imposes that position on the society. Okay, so they avoid compromise. On the other hand, they also avoid having any rights in the population, and they avoid the opportunity to improve a policy through the give and take.
So you mentioned the debt ceiling negotiations. When I picked up your book in January, at that time, the President Biden was adamant that there would be no negotiations. And you use an example in your book about President George H.W. Bush, where he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And the takeaway that you had from that was, it's not just enough to get something done. You need to explain why you got it done and why you got it done the way you did. What's your takeaway from this debt ceiling outcome?
No, again, in the case of the 41st president, he had promised he drew a red line in the sand, so to speak, said there would be no new taxes, and then he decided that he had to agree to new taxes in order to save the American economy at the time. And my view is, I was against him making the pledge in the first place. That said, he made the pledge. But when he changed, then he needed, I thought, to explain to the American people why he went back on his word. And there still would have been Americans who disagreed with him or were unhappy with him. But I believe if he had basically said, here's why I did this, here's why I made the pledge, but here's why I broke my own pledge, why I thought it was necessary to do so, I think he would have garnered a lot of respect. He still would have paid perhaps a political price for it, but I think it would have been better. And I think here, President Biden and Speaker of the House McCarthy, I think both of them need to, again, explain what it is they agreed to. The president, in the case of President Biden, said he wasn't going to agree to any conditions on raising the debt ceiling. Well, in the end, he had to. And my view is, again, he never should have said that he wouldn't. People have to be really careful, by the way, of drawing these absolute lines unless you're really sure you're going to be in a position to stick to it. But I think the president then, again, should be explaining why it was he did in the end compromise and why we are better off as a result. And for Speaker McCarthy, he's going to have to explain this to his own people in the Republican Party, the third, who won't vote with him, who are unhappy, who thinks he gave away too much ground or didn't get enough. I believe it always helps to level with the American people and to explain what it is you're doing. And even if they don't always agree with you, they'll at least respect you for it. And I think that's a necessary thing in our politics. One of the most successful presidents in American history. He's on every historian's short list of the great American presidents, was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president who guided us through the Great Depression and World War II. And one of the things Roosevelt regularly did is he then would go on radio then being the great national medium of its day, and would have these what called fireside chats with the American people, where he essentially turned the Oval Office into a classroom. And he tried to explain what was coming at him, what was coming at the United States, what the choices were, and why he believed certain choices were better than others or less bad. And it had tremendous impact. Again, he didn't persuade everybody, and a lot of Americans disagreed with his social or economic or foreign policies, of course. But again, he brought along some people, which in and of itself was an accomplishment, and I think even those who disagree with him at least better understood his motives and what his thinking was. And I believe it set a really powerful model for anyone in a position of authority, the importance of explaining and of teaching.
So speaking of FDR, I'm going to use him to segue to one of the obligations that I think is most important, but I struggle with understanding fully, and that's the sixth one, the valuing norms. So prior to FDR, the norm for presidents was 2 terms, and he was our first that did not. And now today we see norms eroding, and populism's on the increase. We have this rugged individualism on the right. We have, I guess I'd label it progressive redefinition on the left. And the concept of what is normal is hard to come by. So how do we value and appreciate our norms when it seems that we don't know what normal is?
Okay. Let me say one thing about Roosevelt. You're right. After Washington the first president made the decision that he would not serve more than 2 terms. And the reason was we were a new country. We had just broken away from the tyranny that was Great Britain. And Washington did not want the American president to become the equivalent of a king who would serve for decades. So he established the norm. It wasn't written into the Constitution. There wasn't a law that a president would only serve 2 terms. It lasted through every president until FDR. And FDR's 2 terms came up and 2 things were going on. We were still in the Depression and we were facing what became World War II. And these were exceptional circumstances, and the argument was made that in exceptional circumstances you need to do exceptional things. It's interesting, though, that after FDR, we then had a constitutional amendment, essentially locking in the norm of a 2-term presidency as a safeguard of democracy. I thought it was an interesting statement. And we're open to doing it in other areas. For example, there's a big debate going on in Congress now about the whether congressmen and senators should have the right to buy stocks, individual stocks. And a lot of people, including me, think not, because they inevitably have access to all sorts of information. And that would perhaps give them an advantaged position in when to buy and when to sell a stock. So there's something of a norm that congressmen and senators should not be trading in the stock market. Turns out that some of them are spending half their time trading in the stock market. So one of two things have to happen. Either the voters in their district or state have to say, hey, you violated this norm, we're not going to vote for you, we're going to throw you out of office. Or if they're not prepared to, or that's not good enough, then I think we should pass a law that would preclude them from trading in stocks. So, when norms are not observed, you've got to ask yourself what can be done. And in some cases, it means making something no longer voluntary, but writing it into law. There's some things, though, you can't write into law, or you shouldn't. And that's where norms are really often their most important. It's the things that are short of the law, but still make a big difference because of what they signal or say. I mean, take the most famous norm in American politics. We have an election, somebody wins, somebody loses. And the loser picks up the telephone, calls the winner and says, congratulations, well done, we disagreed, but you won, and I'll respect that outcome, and so forth. And then it signals that democracy is bigger than any one of us. Democracy is bigger than our personal ambitions. The democracy is bigger than our policy differences. That's a really healthy signal. Or at the presidential level, you literally have an outgoing president. If he, whether he's defeated at the polls or his 2 terms are up, driving down Pennsylvania Avenue with the person who replaces him. Could be the person who defeated him, could be a person from the other party who he didn't want to succeed him, and they drive down in a show of solidarity. And again, it's a signal to Americans that, yeah, we've had this rough, bitter election campaign, but now we've got to come together. And if these 2 individuals can come together, surely the rest of us can come together as a nation. It sends a powerful message to the world about the strength of American democracy. And we saw obviously that norm violated just over 2 years ago. And I thought it was extraordinarily unfortunate. It's not the kind of thing you can write into law, but it's the kind of thing we should expect, I believe, as Americans. And we have all sorts of norms in our private lives. There's nothing in the law that says any of you ought to be volunteering to work at Boys State, or that anybody should devote part of their income or wealth to charity. Yet we as Americans believe in volunteerism. We believe in a degree of charitable giving because it's the right thing to do. So I would actually argue that norms are the things that we should do. It's consistent with our obligations to one another or to this country. Public service can be a form of a norm. There are things that, again, I believe that we ought to do rather than have to do. But that's what makes a democracy succeed, is when a lot of people essentially are prepared to do the things they ought to do.
So you mentioned what the world sees when that happens, and you've had the privilege to travel the world over your years. What have you seen as you travel? Because I remember when I was in their shoes 20 years ago as a Boy Stater, the farthest I had left from Oklahoma was to go to the state of Texas. I'd never traveled internationally. I had no other outside experience, and I know we're a product of those experiences. And so what have you seen abroad that has made you come to appreciate what we have here in America and its ideals and its values?
Great question. A couple of things. One is, when you travel in countries that don't have democracy or don't have our freedoms, you very quickly get a sense of the difference. The fear a lot of people live in, the self-censorship, the things they don't say, the things they don't write, the things they don't have the privilege of doing. Could be religion, could be what's in the newspapers, it could be what they say. They could lose their jobs because of political positions they've taken. They could be in prison for their political beliefs. You just see it's a totally different set of rules. I also see in many cases that aside from all the things I just mentioned, economically, I think our freedom has also bolstered our economy. I actually think free markets are called free markets for a reason. The ability of an individual to start a business, to take out a loan or get investment and start a business, and in a very predictable environment in terms of fair tax laws and the rest, gives us a tremendous leg up. It's one of the reasons that we're 340 million people in a world of 8 billion people, but we're still roughly a quarter, 25% of the world's economy. There's a reason that the United States is the engine in many cases of the world. So I'm struck by the differences in many instances. I also think we're obviously not perfect, and one of the things that strikes me about America when I travel is that we're better at correcting our mistakes. The idea to form a more perfect union is at the heart of the Constitution. We had we had the Articles of Confederation. They were clearly inadequate as a blueprint for governing, so we fixed it, and we came up with the Constitution, and we've amended the Constitution, or in various areas of American life where we came up short, say on discrimination. We then had all sorts of civil rights legislation and other things. We're constantly a work in progress. And that's, again, one of our comparative advantages. I notice around the world, a lot of other societies don't have, every government, every society makes mistakes. One of our built-in advantages, though, has traditionally been our ability to learn from them and correct. I've noticed around the world how carefully people watch us. What happens here, what's the line, from Las Vegas, what happens here doesn't stay here. The rest of the world notices.
Yes, sir.
And for better and for worse. So when bad things happen here, people don't understand. It shakes their confidence. They've always held us in great esteem. And when we don't live up to our ideals, I think it disappoints people who are advocates for democracy around the world. When we fail to meet our domestic challenges, I think we actually, in some ways, weaken the case for democracy around the world. I want others to emulate us, but others will only want to emulate us when we perform at a high level. And when we fail to, I think in many ways we discourage others from following a democratic or free market type approach. But look, I still think that even when people around the world disagree with us, particularly with our government, or they see us come up short, what's so interesting is how many still want to come here. And I see people around the world lining up outside of our consulates and embassies. They want to come here, particularly for our universities, our colleges and universities, which are the envy of the world. A lot of people want to migrate here. You look at things like the leaders of the Fortune 100 kind of companies. So many of them are immigrants or the children, first generation Americans. That a lot of the best and the brightest around the world want to come here because this is seen as a place where there really is tremendous opportunity. And I think we want to keep attracting this talent, and it's up to us to make sure then that we offer these kinds of opportunities, whether they're educational opportunities, they're economic opportunities, and the political freedoms and so forth. So we want to continue to be. I already quoted Ronald Reagan once. I'll do it again. We want to be a shining city on a hill that others look at and they say, I can't get that at home, but I could come to the United States and it would be better for me and my family. And I think we've benefited from that enormously over the decades, indeed over the centuries. Virtually everyone in this country, at some point, he or she or some relative, however distant, came to this country. And that's part of the strength of America.
Yes, sir. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, sir. We only have a couple minutes left. So I think the final question is, I want to ask, for these young men here, when they return home, what do you think the best thing they can do is to promulgate these obligations to be good citizens in their communities? What advice would you
Well, a
have?
couple of them we've touched on. One is I would hope that they would think about some part of their lives to do service, whether it's military, civilian, state, federal, local, what have you. I would hope that they, I talk about civics a lot in the book, but learning about this country. Spend some time, as you're doing here in this week, with the basic documents of this country. When they have the chance in high school, if they go on to college, take those courses in civics. Learn more about this country and its history and its government. When they pass the age of 18, exercise that right to vote. Be an informed voter. Learn about the issues. Learn about the candidates. And then in everything else, I'd say practice the obligations, the civility, the avoidance of violence, the openness to compromise, take the time to get informed, be mindful of norms and so forth. Essentially put these things into practice. And my sense is they'll live a better, happier, more satisfying life if they do. But also, my guess is they'll also encourage others to maybe treat them similarly. There's a payoff here. It's interesting how if you do the right thing, others are more likely to do the right thing by you. And so, again, I think it's I think it's great that they volunteered for this experience. And it's the kind of thing that encourages me whenever people ask me, am I pessimistic about our future? And then I hear things like this. I go, no. I think when I see young people making these kinds of commitments, giving up a week to do this, I think it's fantastic. But it's important that not just be a week, but they not leave it behind, that they take this with them and they look for ways to build it into their lives going forward. So I look forward to seeing them do just that.
So, gentlemen, how many of you guys are going to build this into your lives when you get back home? What you learned here at Boys State, what you learned here today? There we go. So, Dr. Haass, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day. I was very pleased that you joined us. Hopefully, we can have you here 1 year on campus here at Rogers State to meet the kids. In the meantime, we are going to send you a staff gift. You're officially part of the staff for counseling the kids. We've got your red shirt in here. You noticed that yesterday, so we look forward to sending it to you, and we'll stay in touch. I really appreciate the time. And it's been an honor. So everybody, let's give them another Boys State thank you.
Thank you so much. Make a deal. I'll wear it on July 4th. That'll be my part of my July 4th statement.
Any final words, sir?
No, again, just I want to thank you and your colleagues for what you do, for your time and your effort. And again, I'm encouraged by this. The more I learn about Boys State, it's just again, it's encouraging, and I just wish these young men a great set of opportunities going forward, and I look forward to seeing their contributions to this country we share. It's a great experiment. We're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration in just over 3 years, and I very much hope and expect we'll have much to celebrate.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for the time again. Take care.
Thank you all. Be well. Thank you.